Good afternoon. My name is Cofer Black. From 1999 until 2002, I was the director of the CIA's Counter-terrorism Center. We call my old unit CTC. It is in that capacity that I'm here today to testify. I promise to try and be brief in my opening remarks so we can get to your questions. I'm here today to tell you and the American people what we did, what we tried to do, and where we fell short, in order to help this commission and the nation understand what happened and encourage the kind of discussion that will help us avoid a similar tragedy in the future. And believe me, our enemies are still out there plotting to attack us and our allies in the war on terrorism. These attacks could take the form of spectaculars like 9/11 or could be smaller, but still effective operations that are easier to mount, like what happened in Madrid. I'm not here to testify as part of a political process or to create another political firestorm over some perceived allegation of negligence or inattention or error by somebody else. Too often in this election year, the effort you're engaged in has revolved around what people in this country perceive as partisan issues. I do not want to engage in an exercise that reflects that kind of unproductive exchange. Frankly, what mattered to me and the men and women I led in the Counter-terrorism Center did not depend on the flavor of the administration, but rather was driven by what we thought needed to get done in our attempt to protect American citizens' property and interests. In order to understand the threats that emerged during 2001 and our response to those threats, I want to briefly provide some context. A lot of this activity is highly classified, so I will provide an overview. I want to begin by describing our overall strategy. We've been systematically attempting to counter the terrorist threat since William Casey established CTC in 1986. Over the following 15 years, we saw the nature of that threat evolve. Our approach to dealing with the threat has also evolved. By the time that I arrived in the summer of 1999, CTC was ready to take the next step in its evolution to embark on a new, more offensive strategy to deal with the terrorist problem. Our plan had a number of elements. First, because terrorism is a global problem, we needed to build a global coalition to work with us to fight the threat. We set out to engage with every liaison service worldwide that was willing to work with us. In some cases, we needed to build up the capabilities of those services, and we did. Second, we worked to actively engage those services that have regional or semi-global capacity. Most importantly, we worked to develop our own operations to advance U.S. counterterrorism objectives by penetrating terrorist safe havens and collecting intelligence that would both inform policy and enable our own operations. Although this was our global strategy, the single issue that overwhelmingly occupied our attention was Osama bin Laden and al-Qaeda. The plan we developed to deal with al-Qaeda involved disrupting UBL operations. This depended heavily on developing sources of both human and technical intelligence that could give us insights into his plans at the tactical level. This is easy to say, but hard to accomplish. Channeling and capturing UBL. This required us to know where UBL was, to develop capture teams, and find a way to have these two streams of activities intersect at a specific time, all from a distance. Psychological operations. Psychological operations are always hard to conduct and hard to measure, but we were trying to drive UBL to areas that might be easier for us to operate in at the same time that we are disrupting his operations. One of our goals was to convince the Taliban that Osama bin Laden was a liability. UBL's lieutenants. Al-Qaeda is not a one-person show. At the same time we were pursuing UBL, we're also working to develop intelligence on his chief lieutenants in order to conduct operations against them. Technical operations. In order to improve our intelligence collection, we were working with a variety of partners outside of CTC to develop innovative approaches to dealing with a denied area like Afghanistan. We continue to refine our approach throughout 2000 and into 2001. pushing forward with those initiatives that seemed to have promise. But this was a hard and a long-term effort. There were no quick fixes short of invading Afghanistan, and that was determined not to be an option prior to 9/11. Let me also set straight the record on the Predator. We were interested in a UAV program to improve our operations in Afghanistan as far back as 1999. While I had to live within my financial resources, CTC was interested in and pushed to develop Predator capabilities. I was convinced that we needed these capabilities and would be able to put them to good use. That said, wanting something does not translate into having it ready to deploy. There were very serious debates over how to proceed, and I object to any notion that CTC, that I, either did not want to develop the capability or that we tried to kill it. 2001 started out with many distinct terrorist threats that required our attention. Again, this is a highly classified area. I'll attempt to summarize what I can tell you. CTC was continuing to work with the FBI and the USS Cole attack, working to follow through on major multi-country takedown of terrorist cells in Southeast Asia, responding to a hostage situation in Ecuador, dealing with another hostage crisis in the Philippines. Overshadowing all this was the rising volume of threat reporting. By the summer of 2001, we were seeing an increased amount of so-called chatter, alluding to a massive terrorist strike. We were receiving this intelligence not only from our own sources, but also from the liaison. Human intelligence was providing the same kinds of insights. Disruption efforts and detentions were also corroborating our concerns about a coming attack. None of this, unfortunately, specified method, time, or place. Where we had clues, it looked like planning was underway for an attack in the Middle East or Europe. At the same time, we were working on two tracks: to go after al-Qaeda and to disrupt the terrorist attacks. And going after the organization, we were doing several things simultaneously. First, we had to penetrate the threat. To do this, we needed to penetrate both the al-Qaeda safe haven in Afghanistan and the organization itself to collect enhanced human and technical intelligence on its activities and to understand it well enough to conduct offensive operations against it. Second, we had to look for opportunities to take down al-Qaeda cells. With the intelligence we collected, we worked to create plans to disrupt or degrade al-Qaeda. Make no mistake, this was a hard mission with a low probability for success in the near term. Finally, we were developing new capabilities to enable us to penetrate and take down the organization. These range from Predator to developing new approaches for going after the Afghan safe haven by working with groups within the country and with any cooperative service in neighboring countries. A number of these initiatives were also included in the so-called December 2000 Blue Sky Memo and in follow-on discussions in the CSG process that had been previously discussed by others and in your staff statements. In order to disrupt, we approached almost 24 cooperative services to go after Osama bin Laden-related targets worldwide. At best, we were hoping to delay any attack to buy ourselves more time, to find out what was planned. We were looking for every opportunity to go on the offensive against al-Qaeda. Where we did not have enough information, we warned. We produced CIA and community analysis that examined the heightened threat situation. Your staff statement this morning ran into titles of a number of these documents. More broadly, I also want to emphasize that CTC and the intelligence community produced significant strategic analysis that examined the growing threat from the international jihadist networks and al-Qaeda. I believe that the record shows that the U.S. government understood the nature of the threat. This understanding was the result of a range of products we produced or contributed to, including personal interaction via participation in the Counter-terrorism Security Group, periodic stand-back assessments on UBL and Sunni extremist-related topics, contributing to the annual patterns of global terrorism, and outside the executive branch, activities such as the DCI's worldwide threat briefings, support for the Bremer Commission on Terrorism, and briefings for the HIPC Terrorism Subcommittee. But ultimately, we were not able to stop what happened on 9/11, despite our actions and our warnings. I promise to be brief, so I'll close with a final thought. What I've been largely talking about is what the Counterterrorism Center can and has done, but ultimately, what we at the agency do is deal with the symptoms of terrorism at a tactical level. As long as there are people who are not happy with their lot in life, as long as the United States is perceived to somehow be the cause of this unhappiness, there will be terrorism. No matter how many plots we uncover and disrupt, no matter how many terrorist organizations we degrade or destroy, another individual or group will rise to take their place. Mr. Chairman, we need to remind the American public of this reality. Those like the families who have lived through the horrors of 9/11 will never forget, but I fear sometimes that the rest of the country is losing sight of the long and hard way ahead. At the more strategic level, the only way to address terrorism is to deal with the issues that create terrorism, to resolve them where possible, and where that's not possible, to ensure that there is an alternative to violence. And that is not something that the Counterterrorism Center or CIA can do. And that is a mission for the broader United States government. Prior to this hearing, I contacted former Counterterrorism Center colleagues at our headquarters here in Virginia and those that are overseas and now in harm's way. I asked them the question, what am I going to tell these people? It should not be my words alone, but it should be ours. And hauntingly, all of my CTC friends independently said exactly the same thing. They used the same words and they said them in the same order. We are profoundly sorry. We did all we could. We did our best. And they said, make them understand how few we were and what we had to deal with. The shortage of money and people seriously hurt our operations and analysis. In CTC, we heard our director's call. I've heard some people say this country wasn't at war. I want to tell you, Mr. Chairman, the Counterterrorism Center was at war. We conducted ourselves at war. And that's the way it is. We did the best we could under the law and with the resources provided and under our defined rules of engagement. Appreciating this, I want to say it's my honor to take full responsibility for the Counterterrorism Center, for those men and women that serve this country so well. I'm proud to do it. I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of all those who served in CTC. I want to thank you for the opportunity to support what even I am beginning to realize is the important work of this commission. Thank you.